Fly the helicopter and I'll make your son my heir. Richard Blackstone bellowed with a cruel laugh, utterly oblivious to the fact that the black woman before him was the true power in the room. Fly this helicopter, and I'll bequeath a king's ransom upon your boy. His words, laced with arrogance and the clinking of champagne flutes, bounced off the glass walls of his opulent Manhattan penthouse, a monument to his ego. Victoria Williams, a woman of quiet strength and untold depths, stood motionless by the edge of the infinity pool, the glittering city skyline a distant echo of the storm brewing within her. The party raged around her, a grotesque spectacle of wealth and privilege. 50 of New York's most elite citizens, draped in designer gowns and dripping in diamonds, watched with the morbid fascination that only the super-rich could muster when witnessing a public takedown. Victoria had arrived as a helicopter mechanic, hired for a routine inspection amidst Richard's lavish birthday celebration. She'd been expecting to tighten bolts and check fluid levels, not to become a pawn in a twisted game designed to amuse a room full of billionaires. Richard, fueled by vintage Dom Perignon and an insatiable thirst for dominance, had decided to turn a working woman's dignity into the evening's entertainment. "Ladies and gentlemen, lend me your ears," Richard announced, clapping his hands with theatrical flair. "This technician claims to know helicopters. Apparently, wielding a wrench qualifies her to command a $12 million flying machine." A wave of cruel laughter rippled through the terrace, punctuated by the popping of champagne corks. Victoria tightened her grip on her toolbox, her knuckles white. 20 years of working with aircraft had taught her the value of patience, of letting the enemy expose themselves before revealing your own hand. This was not her first rodeo. "Sarah, darling," Richard said, turning to his wife, his voice dripping with condescension. "Do you honestly believe someone like this could even tell a cyclic from a rudder pedal?" More laughter erupted, even louder this time. Sarah Blackstone, forever youthful thanks to the miracle of cosmetic surgery, whispered something to her gaggle of equally frozen-faced friends, sending them into paroxysms of giggles. "My son works at the municipal airport," Victoria replied calmly, her voice steady against the tide of derision. "He dreams of becoming a commercial pilot someday." "Oh, how touching," Richard drawled, making a theatrical grimace. "Such a lovely aspiration for people like you. But let's be brutally honest, shall we? Commercial piloting requires education, refinement, a certain social standing." Each word landed like a shard of ice, yet Victoria's face remained serene, an impenetrable mask. Richard, blinded by his own arrogance, failed to see the calculated fury simmering behind her calm eyes. "So, here's my proposition," Richard announced, spreading his arms wide, a self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. "If you can take off in my helicopter and fly a single circuit around this building, I guarantee that your son will become the heir to 50% of my fortune. An $800 million deal." A stunned silence descended on the terrace, so complete you could hear the gentle lapping of the water in the infinity pool. Even the tuxedoed waiters froze, their silver trays suspended in mid-air. "And if I fail?" Victoria asked, her voice betraying only a hint of genuine curiosity, a subtle nuance that only served to embolden Richard's mischievous grin. "If you fail," he sneered, "you will sign a document publicly admitting that people of your station should not aspire beyond their natural limitations. And," he added with a flourish, "it will be plastered all over my social media for my 2 million followers to enjoy." Victoria looked from the sleek helicopter to Richard, then to the sea of faces eagerly awaiting her answer, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something akin to vulnerability crossed her face, as if she were weighing the impossible weight of the challenge. But anyone who looked closer would have realized it wasn't fear that made her hands hesitate over her toolbox. It was the restrained power of someone about to utterly dismantle the rules of a game the others didn't even realize they were already losing. "I accept," she said simply, her voice carrying a quiet resonance that made a few of the guests exchange uneasy glances. Richard clapped his hands together, his eyes gleaming with malicious glee. "Wonderful! Is anyone filming this?" I need to document this historic moment for posterity. In his 60 years of life, few things gave Richard as much pleasure as witnessing the reaffirmation of the social hierarchy he considered immutable. Now, in front of 50 witnesses from New York's upper crust, he was about to deliver what he considered a vital lesson in reality. "Sarah, darling, record everything." He instructed his wife, who already had her phone trained on Victoria. "This will be perfect content for my YouTube channel. 2 million followers are going to love seeing how the real world works." Victoria watched the flurry of activity around her with that same disconcerting calm. The guests formed a semicircle around the helicopter, their champagne glasses shimmering in the terrace lights. Bets were already being placed on how long it would take her to crack. "Before we commence this spectacle," Richard said, pausing for dramatic effect, "I think it's only fair that everyone understands exactly what's at stake here." He swaggered over to Victoria, stopping uncomfortably close. "This woman has been repairing helicopters for... how long was it now? 20 years? 20 years. Victoria confirmed without flinching. 20 years. Richard echoed to the audience, dripping with sarcasm. 20 years of tightening screws and changing oil. And now she has the audacity to think that qualifies her to fly an aircraft worth more than most houses. Margaret Whitmore, the mayor's wife, whispered to her companion, "Richard is being exceptionally cruel, even by his standards." But her voice was swallowed by the wave of laughter. "You know what bothers me the most?" Richard continued, his voice taking on a venomous edge. "It's this arrogance disguised as humility, this absurd notion that hard work can somehow replace education, class, birth." He gestured theatrically, as if fiddling with machinery is the same as commanding it. For a split second, Victoria's fists clenched, a movement so subtle it was almost imperceptible. Unbidden, memories flooded her mind: her 19-year-old son, Michael, juggling 2 jobs to pay for flight school, the late nights spent poring over aerodynamics textbooks while she studied mechanics manuals at the kitchen table. "My son is going to be a pilot," she said, her voice cutting through the laughter like a laser. "And he's going to fly for airlines that people like you will never be able to afford." A stunned silence followed. Richard blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by the unexpected fire in her eyes. "How touching," he said, recovering quickly. "But dreams don't exactly pay for flight school tuition, do they? Do you have any idea how much it costs to train a commercial pilot? $300,000 minimum." He turned to the guests, spreading his hands in mock exasperation. "Imagine, a woman who earns, what, $40,000 a year, thinking she can afford an elite education for her son." Each word was a calculated blow, but instead of shattering her, Richard's cruelty seemed to ignite a flame that she had kept carefully banked for years. Her eyes, no longer downcast, were fixed on the helicopter, not with fear, but with a familiarity that made some of the spectators wonder why she looked so at home. "James," Richard barked, summoning his personal assistant, "bring me the papers I prepared. I want her to sign them before she even touches that aircraft." He smiled with sadistic anticipation. "It's a simple document, just confirming that she understands the risks of attempting to fly without proper qualifications, and that she assumes full responsibility for any potential accidents. And," he added with a flourish, "there's an interesting clause in here, too. If, or rather when, she fails, she agrees to record a video statement admitting that people of her background should not aspire beyond their natural abilities. Nothing personal, of course, just social realism." What Richard failed to notice was that with each cruel word, the atmosphere in the room was subtly shifting. Marina Blackwood, the billionaire pharmaceutical executive, watched the scene with growing unease. Robert Chun, the tech mogul, exchanged a knowing glance with his wife. There were limits, even for the elite, to what constituted acceptable behavior. "What if I do it?" Victoria asked, her voice maintaining that unnerving calm. "Impossible," Richard scoffed. "But, hypothetically speaking, if by some miracle you actually manage to take off and land without killing anyone, I'll honor my word. Your son becomes heir to $800 million. He paused for effect. "And I will post a video on all my social media accounts, admitting that I was wrong." Without a flicker of hesitation, Victoria took the pen and signed the documents. The movement was so fluid, so devoid of tremor or doubt, that a ripple of unease spread through the crowd. "Excellent," Richard exclaimed, clapping his hands. "Now, before the show begins, anyone want to place bets? How long before she throws in the towel?" 30 seconds after she tries to start the engine, shouted Thomas Bradford, owner of a vast hotel empire. "I say she won't even try to start it," countered Patricia Wells, heiress to a sprawling real estate fortune. As Victoria walked toward the helicopter, something extraordinary happened. Her gait transformed. The careful steps of an intimidated worker replaced by the confident stride of someone who knew exactly where she was going. She opened the aircraft door and examined the interior with eyes that seemed to know every switch and dial. As she adjusted the pilot's seat and tested the pedals, some of the more observant guests noticed something disturbing. She moved around the cabin as if she had done it 1,000 times before. Each fresh humiliation only fueled something deep within her, a silent strength nurtured by the very injustice they sought to impose. It was as if she was turning their contempt into a potent fuel, ready to rewrite not just her own story, but everyone's understanding of power, privilege, and the dangerous consequences of underestimating someone whose true identity remained concealed beneath layers of prejudice and misguided expectations. Victoria adjusted her seatbelt with precise movements that made Margaret Whitmore frown. There was something disturbingly familiar about the way her hands found each control without hesitation, as if the cockpit were familiar territory. "This is taking far too long," Richard bellowed from the terrace, his patience wearing thin along with his sobriety. "Have you changed your mind and decided to give up? No one will blame you for acknowledging your limitations." Victoria ignored him completely. Her fingers danced across the navigation instruments, checking the altimeter, fuel gauge, and hydraulic systems with the methodical precision of someone who had performed this ritual hundreds of times. Then her cell phone vibrated. She glanced at the message and, for the first time since arriving on the terrace, a genuine smile graced her lips. The text read, "Documentation confirmed. Everything ready for live broadcast. Good luck, VH." Margaret whispered to her husband, John. "Look at the way she's handling the controls. That's not amateurish." John Whitmore, who had flown small aircraft in his youth, watched Victoria's deliberate actions with growing interest. "Sarah," Richard snapped at his wife, "make sure you're recording in high resolution. I want every detail of her failure documented for posterity." Sarah complied, but something about Victoria's calm confidence made her uneasy. Having worked as a television producer before marrying Richard, she had developed an instinct for recognizing when a story was about to take an unexpected turn. Richard, emboldened by power and the adrenaline rush of public humiliation, decided to ratchet up the spectacle. "Listen up, everyone," he bellowed, ensuring he had the attention of every guest. "Since our amateur pilot is taking so long to figure out how to start the engine, how about we make this even more interesting?" He pulled out his phone and opened his Instagram account, where 2 million followers eagerly awaited new content. "I'm live streaming this to my followers right now. The whole world can witness this educational moment about social realism and inappropriate aspirations." What Richard didn't know was that, at that very moment, Michael Williams, Victoria's 19-year-old son, was watching the live stream with his classmates at the municipal airport hangar. His fists were clenched, but a proud smile played on his lips. He knew something that none of the people on that terrace did. "Show them who you really are, Mom," he whispered to the screen. Back on the terrace, Victoria completed her pre-flight inspection with the meticulousness that her Air Force instructors had instilled in her 20 years prior. Yes, she had worked as a mechanic for 2 decades, but that wasn't the whole story. Victoria Williams had been a military helicopter pilot for 8 years before leaving active duty to raise her son as a single mother. Marina Blackwood approached Robert Chun, her voice low. "Something about this situation bothers me. Her body language, the way she's checking the instruments. She doesn't strike me as an amateur." Robert nodded, his years as a CEO having taught him to read people with uncanny accuracy. Richard is making a mistake. Great business people don't get where they are by underestimating people, especially when those people accept seemingly impossible challenges with such composure. Thomas Bradford checked his Apple Watch. It's been 15 minutes. For someone who doesn't know how to fly, she's spending an awfully long time on the technical procedures. Inside the helicopter, Victoria adjusted her headset and tuned into the air traffic control frequency. When her voice echoed over the radio, it had the crisp, authoritative tone honed by years of military service. Manhattan Control Tower, helicopter November 7th Alpha Charlie requesting clearance for local flight. Approximate duration, 15 minutes. The response was immediate. November 7th Alpha Charlie, you are cleared for local flight. Maintain a maximum altitude of 1,000 feet and report your position every 5 minutes. Some of the more astute guests noted the professionalism of the exchange. Patricia Wells tugged on her husband's arm. David, she just used professional aviation terminology. That's not luck or improvisation. Richard, oblivious to the undercurrents of concern rippling through his guests, continued his performance for his online audience. Folks, you are about to witness a lesson in reality. Some people are born for certain positions in life and others need to learn to accept their limitations. The comments on his live stream began to divide. While some still applauded his social experiment, others questioned the ethics of publicly humiliating a working woman. But none of them suspected what was about to unfold. Victoria checked the flight controls one last time, collective cyclic rudder pedals. Each responded perfectly under her experienced hands. It was like returning home after a long absence. Margaret Whitmore, unable to contain her anxiety, approached Richard with a determined look. Richard, I think you should reconsider this. Something tells me that this woman what? Richard interrupted, his voice laced with irritation. Margaret, you're being overly dramatic. She's just a mechanic trying to fly a sophisticated aircraft. What could possibly go wrong? At that precise moment, the helicopter's engine roared to life with a perfect, resonant thrum. There was no sputtering, no hesitant attempts, no fumbling with the controls. The engine started on the first try, smooth and professional, as if Victoria did this every day. Richard's smile faltered for the first time. The propellers began to spin with increasing speed, creating the characteristic downdraft that made the guests instinctively step back. John Whitmore grabbed Richard's arm, his face etched with concern. My God, Richard, I've flown for years, and I know when someone knows what they're doing. This woman, she has real training. For the first time since he had conceived his cruel scheme, Richard felt a cold knot of uncertainty tighten in his stomach. He watched Victoria through the cockpit window, noting her professional concentration, her confident posture, her precise movements that left no room for error. Impossible, he muttered to himself. But as the word left his mouth, a small, insistent voice in the back of his mind, a voice he had long ignored, began to whisper that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The helicopter was ready for takeoff. Victoria looked through the glass at Richard, their eyes meeting for a moment that seemed to stretch into an eternity. And in that look, he saw something that sent a chill down his spine, the absolute certainty of someone who not only knew how to fly, but who was about to use that skill to utterly rewrite the rules of a game he had started without knowing his true opponent. The helicopter lifted off the terrace with a smoothness that made Richard's heart skip a beat. There was no hesitation, no sudden lurching, no hint of instability. Victoria raised the aircraft as if it were a natural extension of her body, executing a takeoff that even seasoned pilots would deem flawless. My God, John Whitmore breathed, his years of aviation experience allowing him to recognize true mastery. Richard, this woman is a real pilot. Richard felt his legs weaken beneath him. The live stream continued, and in the comments section, the first technical observations began to appear. Users with aviation knowledge pointed out the precision of her movements, her professional radio communication, her ease with the controls. This can't be happening, Richard muttered, his words picked up by the microphone on his phone. broadcasting his crumbling confidence to 2 million viewers in real time. Victoria executed a perfect turn around the building, maintaining constant altitude and airspeed. Through the panoramic windows of the terrace, the guests could see her flying with a calm assurance that utterly refuted the narrative of humiliation that Richard had so carefully crafted. Margaret Whitmore approached Sarah Blackstone, her voice filled with suspicion. "Sarah, did you know? Your face tells me something isn't right here." Sarah, whose years in television had honed her instincts, recognized when a story was about to explode. "I don't know who she really is, but Richard just made a terrible mistake, and he did it in front of millions of people." In the live stream comments, the tide was turning rapidly. At Aviation Expert Mike, "Guys, this is professional level piloting. Who is this woman?" At Helicopter Pilot Lisa, 15 years in the business and I can confirm she knows exactly what she's doing. At NYC_flight control, "She communicated with us using perfect military terminology. This is no fluke." Richard read the comments with growing horror. "Turn it off," he screamed at Sarah. "Turn off the broadcast now." "Richard, there are 2 million people watching," Sarah replied, her face pale. "If I cut the feed now, it will look like we're trying to cover something up." At that moment, Victoria landed the helicopter with surgical precision. The touchdown was so smooth that the champagne flutes on the surrounding terraces didn't even tremble. She shut down the engine with the same professional grace and calmly removed her headset. As she stepped out of the aircraft, her demeanor had completely changed. Gone was the humiliated worker. In her place stood the serene figure of someone who had just proven their competence before a global audience. "Satisfied with the flight?" Victoria asked, walking towards Richard with unwavering steps. Richard opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Around him, 50 members of New York's elite watched him with a mixture of horror and embarrassment. The tables had turned completely. Now he was the one being evaluated and judged. "I fulfilled my part of the agreement," Victoria continued, her voice carrying an authority that made many of the guests wonder how they had failed to recognize it before. "I flew your helicopter in front of everyone, as you requested." Marina Blackwood discreetly approached Robert Chun. "I know that posture," she whispered. "It's the same one we all have when we're in command of our empires. She's no ordinary employee." Victoria pulled out her cell phone and opened an app. "While you were having your fun," she said, "I took the liberty of doing a little research on our host." Richard's blood ran cold. "What are you doing?" "Richard Blackstone," Victoria read aloud, her voice clear and resonant, carrying to all the guests and the live broadcast that was still, unbelievably, running. "Declared assets of $1.2 billion. But a recent IRS investigation revealed discrepancies of $400 million in undeclared offshore accounts." A shocked murmur rippled through the terrace. Richard reached out as if to snatch the phone from her. "You can't. Where did you get this information?" Case number 2023, FR 8847. New York State Supreme Court. Victoria continued relentlessly. "Investigation for tax evasion, corporate fraud, and stock manipulation. Status: under active criminal investigation." Sarah dropped her phone with a clatter. The live broadcast captured every word, every detail being transmitted to millions of viewers who now saw Richard not as a powerful billionaire, but as a potential criminal. "And here's the most interesting part," Victoria said, turning the phone screen towards the cameras. 3 former employees suing for sexual harassment. 5 minority suppliers defrauded on contracts. 12 families illegally evicted from properties acquired through bribery. "Stop," Richard screamed, his face crimson with rage and panic. "You have no right to." Victoria cut him off, her voice finally revealing the full depth of her anger. "You just publicly humiliated me, attacked my son, my family, and our dignity in front of millions of people. Why is it that you can destroy people, but they can't expose the truth about you?" Robert Chun pulled his wife aside. "We need to leave here now. This man is going to be arrested within days, and we don't want to be associated with this." But Victoria wasn't finished. "Now about my real identity," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. My full name is Victoria Williams Henderson, CEO of Henderson Aviation Solutions. The reaction was immediate. Henderson Aviation was one of the largest executive aviation companies on the East Coast, valued at $3 billion. Margaret Whitmore gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. My God, Richard, you just humiliated one of the most powerful women in American aviation. 15 years in the Air Force, Victoria continued, her biography now being broadcast live to an ever-growing audience. 3 decorations for exceptional service in combat, test pilot for new military helicopter models, and yes, I founded my company after leaving the service to raise my son as a single mother. Richard tried to speak, but his voice came out as a strangled croak. The live broadcast had gone viral. Comments were pouring in by the thousands per second, all calling for his head. My son Michael, whom you have so ridiculed, is graduating from Harvard Extension School with a degree in commercial aviation on a full scholarship for academic merit. And yes, he will be a commercial pilot, and he'll probably start out flying executive jets for people like you. Patricia Wells, the real estate heiress, approached Victoria with genuine respect. Mrs. Williams Henderson, I apologize for the deplorable behavior we have witnessed here. The apologies are not for me, Victoria replied with dignity. They are for all the people you humiliated before me, who did not have the power or position to defend themselves. Richard's phone began to ring incessantly. Lawyers, public relations consultants, members of his company's board, all in a state of utter panic. The live broadcast had become the most talked about topic on social media, and not in a good way for him. Sarah approached him, whispering desperately, Richard, you have to do something. The company's stock is plummeting. Your sponsors are canceling contracts. The phone won't stop ringing. Victoria watched the chaos unfold around her with her usual serenity. Now, about our original bet, she said, capturing everyone's attention once more. You said you would make my son your heir if I flew the helicopter. Richard shook his head frantically. That was a joke. You know it was a joke. Funny? Victoria said, her smile chillingly cold. It didn't seem like a joke when you forced me to sign those documents, when you threatened to destroy my reputation, when you broadcast my supposed humiliation to 2 million people. She turned towards Sarah's cell phone camera, speaking directly to the online audience. To everyone watching today, you witnessed how prejudice and arrogance can utterly blind people to reality became crystal clear that day. Richard Blackstone judged Victoria solely on her appearance, her race, and what he perceived as her profession. In doing so, he exposed not only his profound ignorance but also the deep-seated corruption within his own character. The online response to the broadcast was an explosion of support for Victoria. Hashtags like #JusticeForVictoria and #RichardBlackstoneFraud began trending virally, dominating every social media platform imaginable. As Victoria walked toward the exit, leaving behind a completely shattered Richard and a party spiraling into absolute chaos, she knew this moment would be transformative. It wasn't just about her. It was a stark warning to all those powerful figures who believed they could belittle and humiliate others without facing any consequences. Because sometimes, the person you choose to demean possesses a strength and resilience far exceeding your wildest imaginations. And justice? Justice has a remarkable way of leveling the playing field, often when you least expect it. 6 months later, Richard Blackstone found himself staring out the window of his modest, cramped apartment in Queens, a far cry from his opulent Manhattan penthouse. The IRS investigation had been relentless, freezing a staggering 90% of his assets. 3 former employees had filed million-dollar lawsuits, each detailing instances of abuse and mistreatment. His company, once a symbol of his towering success, had filed for bankruptcy, its reputation irreparably tarnished. The live stream from that fateful night had gone viral, amassing over 50 million views, each one a testament to his downfall. #RichardBlackstoneFraud continued its relentless trend, a constant reminder of his disgrace. No reputable company wanted anything to do with him. His name had become synonymous with scandal and deceit. Victoria, in stark contrast, had channeled the episode into a powerful catalyst for change. Henderson Aviation Solutions experienced unprecedented growth, skyrocketing by 300% in just 6 months. Contracts poured in from companies that genuinely valued diversity and inclusion, recognizing the importance of a fair and equitable workplace. Michael, now a college graduate, had not only excelled in his studies but was already living his dream, flying corporate jets for a prestigious firm. "Mom," Michael said during a warm family dinner, "I still can't believe you endured all that humiliation just to expose who he really was. It's incredible." Victoria smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Son, I learned a valuable lesson in the Air Force. The best battles are won with strategy, not anger. I simply gave Richard enough rope to hang himself. He revealed his true self all on his own." Margaret Whitmore, who had witnessed the entire scene unfold, became a fervent advocate for anti-discrimination policies at her foundation, dedicating herself to creating a more just and equitable society. "That day fundamentally changed how I viewed privilege and prejudice," she confessed in a heartfelt interview. Victoria's story inspired countless others to speak out against discrimination and abuse. We saw a wave of change. 3 executives were subsequently fired after employees bravely recorded their abusive behavior and shared the evidence. Richard, isolated and utterly broken, finally grasped a fundamental truth. Power devoid of humanity is nothing more than fleeting tyranny. Victoria had proven beyond any doubt that underestimating someone based solely on their appearance is the most costly mistake one can possibly make. The real victory wasn't simply destroying Richard. It was about building something far greater than his pettiness could ever hope to achieve. It was about creating a legacy of empowerment, resilience, and genuine change. If this story of resilience and justice has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that demonstrate the enduring power of the human spirit and prove that you should never underestimate the power of those you choose to humiliate. Their potential is often far greater than you could ever imagine.